Good afternoon, colleagues. It's my pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you to Heinz and to Jeanette, who kindly invited me to the summer school, and I hope you do enjoy and you will enjoy the summer school altogether. Today, I will talk about case study Yugoslavia, but also much more broader about issues on social work, war, and peace studies. And there will be a lot of ideas that I will bring in. I would like to ask you to write down the things that you find particularly important or you want us to discuss more on them. And these might be concepts or some ideas or your experiences. And please, then after the break, we will come back and we will share this all together. So I have a PowerPoint to share with you, which I will do now. And um, uh, and so let me know if what are the ideas that were particularly important to you. So I don't know if I told you that I am from University of Ljubljana, and I teach at the Faculty of Social Work, the Department of Social Inclusion and Social Justice. So I believe that social work curricula and research must broaden their scope to include critical social work, war, and peace studies. By so far, we didn't have much curriculums in social work that would address these issues. And I particularly like this statue of Francis Bruno Catalano, his installation, and we can just think about what do they symbolize. Is this a person who is longing for home or going somewhere and looking for where he comes from, or looks where he's going, and is this what is the emptiness? Is this a trauma or loneliness, or the wish for belonging, or the question, where do I belong? And all of these issues are very much important to social work. So the issues that we face today is the increased militarization and violence. It's new that there are military personnel that comes to the television. It's new that there is the idea that men should go in and face the conscriptions. The number of refugees and people on the move, people who are uprooted, is increasing on the daily basis. Not to mention 8 million people who have fled Ukraine. This brings with poverty, hunger, destruction of living spaces. I mean, it was not only in Afghanistan that some places are completely unable to be populated, but now what is going to be with Gaza? What is going to be with Ukraine? There are places where people will not be able to live without illnesses for the next 100 of years. Ecological devastation is we are facing it, we are in the middle of it, but still some people don't believe in it. In my country, the president of the parliament at the moment for the last few weeks is a man, president of the political party that is called The Truth, although this party is the party of the lies, like like Orwell would say. He and his clan don't believe in global warming. So this is now ruling our country. There is more and more traumatize people. And when we look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, we often forget to include people with mental health problems in these issues when we speak about rights and so. Patriarchy taking hold as women, men, and non-binary people, transgender people, etc., are divided along the traditional gender lines. Remember that at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, trans women had extreme difficulties to cross the border. The customers were telling them that they are men and they are obliged and they will be criminalized if they leave the country. Genocide and ecocide go hand in hand. We know this also from today's recent development. Neo-patriarchy is a phenomenon that is growing. I don't have time now to go into that, but we can see the neoliberalism, a lot of people who are the losers of global capitalism, and the losers are trying to install the old patriarchal rule and searching for the scapegoats. The scapegoats are not only migrant people and sexual minorities, but also women. And impoverishment of an even larger number of people that we face today is inevitable, causing new political conflicts. So when we look at the social work and war, or social work war curriculum, I will just mention few issues, and I invite you that you add to this your own thoughts, your own ideas. So Shula Ramon, who is a social work professor, who was one of the early persons who wrote a book on social work and war, she always said that war is one of the few events in which social workers and service users or clients experience a shared reality. We can add to this sentence that when the war happens, there is even less social workers than there were before the war, but the needs of the people are much greater, because also social workers, they go back to their families, they go abroad, they become refugees and things like that. War is a phenomenon. It's a very atavistic, it's a very archaic way of deliberately destroying and killing and exterminating people and culture and children in a particular area who belong to a particular ethnic or religious group or citizenship. And the fact that this is a deliberate act is very traumatizing to people. When some psychologists, they say if there is a natural disaster, even though we know that the natural disasters are man-made disasters and so, it is less traumatizing than when a person stands in front of someone who kills, who rapes, who tortures children and things like that. Emergency and exceptional situations like war deepen and reinforce social and health inequalities. So not only that people are again divided along the gender, ethnic, and religious lines, but the pre-war inequalities are deepening. And you will see this also on Ukrainian case. So the transgenerational and intergenerational trauma is also a big issue. In post-war period, as we know, people are likely to be divided into the deserving one and the undeserving. So a phenomena that we well known in social work from the 19th century on, the deserved poor and the undeserved poor. So the deserving One are those who were injured in the war, those who fought on the right side, and the undeserving are those who emigrated. For example, when people came from immigration from Kosovo or from Bosnia and Herzegovina, they were asked, where have you been during the war? Why did you go? We fought here and you had a good life, and things like that. Not to mention those who are seen as from the wrong ethnic affiliation or from a suspect family. For example, a lot of Roma, Sinti, Ashkenazi, and so ethnic minorities, Roma people, they recalled that during the war in different parts of Yugoslavia after 1991 until 1995, they were accused to be those who collaborated with the invaders. So they were this question whether this is a stereotype that goes on the top of the old-fashioned stereotype, or the people from the very disadvantaged and marginalized and stigmatized ethnic group, they do collaborate and things like that. So, but nevertheless, a lot of them became refugees because of that accusation. The war veterans are those who are especially important. They got better pensions than other disabled people if they become impaired and things like that. But in social work, when we look at the war, we should not forget important examples of generosity and humanity, which we know from all wars, and it is important to document them. I would give you two examples from the Second World War. One is the Kindertransport. Kindertransport was 1938. The UK government sponsored a train to bring 10,000 children from Eastern Europe to the UK. Eastern European children were either from Jewish families, from Roma families, or from ethnic minorities that were seen as, the not wanted and so. And another thing that it's even much more forgotten and much less known is the action of Diana Budisavljević. Diana Budisavljević was an Austrian woman. She married a Croat man. This was before the Second World War. And then she moved to Zagreb. And when the Nazi occupied the Kingdom of Yugoslavia at that time, the Croats developed something that was called the Independent State of Hungary, of Croatia, NDH, Nezavisna država Hrvatska. This was a Nazi state, and the Nazi collaborators were the leaders of that state. The consequence was that close to Zagreb, like 20 kilometers away from Zagreb, they built a horrible concentration camp, extermination camp, very similar than Auschwitz, Jasenovac. And in Jasenovac, they put Serbs who happened to be in Croatia, in very mixed country, in a mixed kingdom, mixed ethnic and religious kingdom of the Balkan. And so the Serbs, the Jews, the Roma and Sinti, and the communists. And Diana Budisavljević, because she was ethnically Austrian, she had the access to the Nazis. She spoke German, and she was seen as their people. And she was very silently, with the help of some other people who later on, and this is so fascinating for social work history, who later on became the pioneers of social work education in Croatia. She brought over 10,000 children, Serbian children, from Croatian Nazi concentration camps from 1991 to 1940, from 1941 to 1945. And nobody knew about her. We can imagine that if people don't deal with the history of compliances and the past, there is a tendency of forgetting, of denying, of silencing. In Croatia, never actually spoke about Diana Budisavljević, but they were Serbs. And there is a wonderful Serbian documentarian, and there are more than one films actually about Diana Budisavljević and her courageous action, and also the action of other people. But this action was never actually linked with the development of social work education in Croatia in 1952. I was really happy that I discovered this link, because close collaborators with Diana Budisavljević were three persons I found, who were later on professors of social work in the first school of social work in socialist Yugoslavia that was established in 1952. But this is a story that I just wrote, and the book will come out in autumn this year. The history of social work in Slovenia and Yugoslavia, the socialist, the example of the socialism with a human face. So I hope you will have the opportunity to read it. My question to myself, and also the question to you and for the further discussion, is: do people still see wars as inevitable? Do people still see that wars are something inevitable? And how can we prevent them? How can we really work for peace in social work? What we also face today is not only humanitarian crisis because of everything I already addressed, but also the crisis of humanitarianism. We see today that, for example, the longer the war in Ukraine is going on, the more there are voices of people who say, we have enough of Ukrainians here in the country. They get too much social welfare money. For example, in Ukraine, in Poland, these are the case. I mean, and also in Slovenia, Slovenia is not much better. So war never ends with the end of the war. And the best example for that is former Yugoslavia. So not only that the ethnic divide prevails, there are examples of Vukovar. Vukovar is a city at the border between Croatia and Serbia. And this was multi-ethnic town. It's quite rural. I go there sometimes because they opened a new university, a new department of social work at the University of Osijek, which is the second biggest city in Croatia. And it's still very rural. But Vukovar was very much bombed and destroyed and so. And then there were a lot of international projects and international money coming into Vukovar, with hope also that the multi-ethnic city revitalizes. So there are schools, there are one or two schools that they with the flag of being multi-ethnic schools. But the reality is that the children from Croat families come to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the school starts at 8, and the children from Serbian families come at school that starts at 8:30. The Croat children have Croat teachers, the Serbian children have Serbian teachers. These kids don't mix. There is absolutely not at all a restoration of a mixed multi-ethnic society. And we speak about the time that is 30 years after the war in Yugoslavia ended, if we put it like 1995 with the Dayton Agreement, when there was a kind of official end of the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Still today, people search for graves, for lost people who died, for mass graves. Bones will be looked at. There are mines, and a lot of children and adults became disabled after the war because of the minefields. Like we know this from a lot of African countries. Trauma is long-standing. Survivors of mass rape are still not asking for reparations. Vjosa Krasniqi is one of the social work professors from University of Kosovo, from Pristina, actually. Pristina is the capital of Kosovo. And she looked at the survivors, and there are about 20,000 women and some men who survived rape and mass rape as the weapon of war during the Kosovo War. So when the Kosovo War started and ends, it's an open question. Nowadays, the war don't have an official start and official end like in the Second World War. So we speak about the period of the 90s, and maybe we can say at 1999, when NATO bombed Belgrade for a couple of days to stop Serbians to attack Kosovars and Kosovo. This might be, in some views, the end, the official end of the war in Kosovo, but this is not. It's not clear, or some say 2003 and things like that. Well, here the point is that out of 20,000 people, almost less than 1,600 women and some men ask for reparation for being the victims of mass rape. This is one issue. Another issue is that when I say that war never ends with the end of the war, the Republic of Serbia still today doesn't recognize Republic of Kosovo. Kosovo is the youngest country of Europe. It was formally established and recognized by many countries in 2008. And since then, they are fighting for recognition from the side of Republic of Serbia. The Serbian nationalists and also official politics still claim that Kosovo is Serbian land. And they go back to medieval time, and we know from Gaza and from also other places that claiming the place like hundreds of centuries ago, it's really a problem. And they claim that there was a famous Kosovo battle and in the Kosovo, so-called Kosovo field in the 15th century. The Serbs lost, but this is a kind of symbolic date and a symbolic event that for the Serbs mean proof that Kosovo is part of Serbia. Restorative justice is very important. How to restore the solidarity, the trust, and all of this. So another example, looking at the mass rape and rape against women, mostly women, but also some men during the wartime, is our mass rape in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we know from the Democratic Republic of Congo, we know from Rwanda that rape was an evidently a weapon of war, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina came, so not from 1991 to 1995, as I said. And in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there were about 50,000 women who were either Muslims or Bosnians. They not necessarily that they were of Muslim religion. Religion didn't play a big role, although some believe that this is a religious war, was a religious war, which was not at all. I mean, Serbia with the President Milosevic, and Croatia with Tudjman simply wanted to divide Bosnia and Herzegovina among themselves. So 50,000 women were mass raped or raped during the war, and a tiny number actually asked for financial reparations. And Sanela Basic, professor of social work in Sarajevo University, is one of the people who actually I would refer to when talking about these issues. So you can see that during the war and after the war, nationalism is reinventing. Ideologies of national superiority, dehumanization, and so on. Pre-war inequalities exacerbate. People with disabilities are forgotten, older people, ethnic minorities, etc., and so forth. So it's really, we have all sorts of issues during the war, but especially in the post-war time. Yeah. Also, we can see in Ukraine that those who already were multiply disadvantaged, especially those who lived in large institutions, residential institutions for people with disabilities, they had less resources, there were very few resources and things like that. Jan Patočka, philosopher, Czech, I like his quote. This is from the 70s, but it's very true. He says that the use of violence against violence is a cultural pathology. We continue to be fascinated by force, allow it to lead us along its paths. Fascinating and deceiving us, making us its dupes. Where we believe we have mastered it and can depend on it for security, we are in reality in a state of demobilization and are losing the war, which cunningly changed its visage, but has not ceased. The upheaval by the front line is not an immediate trauma, but a fundamental transformation of human existence. War in the form of the front line marks humans forever. And of course, today, drones mark humans forever. We can see a completely insensible, crazy, completely violence for violence wars, for example, in Iran. A lot of writers, among other people, Ruth Seifert, who was for a long time at the Fachhochschule Ruth Seifert from Regensburg, I'm sorry, and she also worked in Kosovo a lot. She spoke, but not only herself, a lot of other people spoke about post-war neoliberal peace, meaning that after the war, there are a lot of international humanitarian organization or state organization that funds the state, but what do they bring? They believe that they bring a kind of social cohesion, that they bring peace, but very often what they bring is the neoliberal peace, installing the principles of people fighting each other in the sense of in economic sense, etc. And Sven Hesle, who was a very well-known professor of social work from Department of Social Work in Sweden at the University of Stockholm, He worked in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we together, we established a new department of social work in Banja Luka, which is now the Republic of Serbia. So the Bosnia and Herzegovina has a kind of three parts: the Bosnian part, the Croat part, and the Serbian part. And you know probably that in last couple of years, when Russia and Putin Siloviks attacked Ukraine, Republics of Serbia says we also want to become part of Serbia, and we should get we should get the borders replaced. And a lot of Bosnian colleagues say our peace after 30 years is very insecure. But look what Sven Hesle experienced when he came in Bosnia and Herzegovina after the war, and he with humanitarian money and with humanitarian organizations that should bring peace. He said, when we arrived in Sarajevo at the beginning of 1996, hundreds of NGOs coming from different parts of the world were in the area to address the emergency. We found very few children in need of families, because most of the orphan children had already been taken in by their extended families, for the most part by their grandparents. The expectations we brought with us from Sweden and the reasons of which UNICEF had recruited us were often not confirmed by our observations and conversations. So he says, and he's one of the rare persons who said this so blatantly, very often the needs of the people on the ground after the wars are very often not really those needs which humanitarian or state-funded organizations want to address. This is the last book that Shula Ramon and myself edited last year, and it is called Social Work in War-Torn Contexts. And a couple of my colleagues, one writes about Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think precisely Sanela Basic, whom I already mentioned, but also Jasminka Dedic, who addresses the denial of the genocide. So probably you remember last year, a lot was discussed about Srebrenica because it was 30 years of Srebrenica genocide. Raphael Lemkin was the person who coined the word genocide after the Second World War. He was Jewish, and he fought with the United Nations and that there would be that something like genocide, a deliberate destruction of an ethnic group or another group of people. It doesn't need to be an ethnic group, but it has to be a deliberate destruction to eliminate a group of people, so that this would be differentiated from the notion of war. War is war. War is one thing, but some wars also include genocide, and some don't. In the Journal of Human Rights and Social Work from 2024, this is a special issue that I edited, and here you will find some articles are open access, and there are some articles on mass rape, Violca Krasniqi, Olha Shved from Ukraine, about rape as a war weapon in Ukraine, and also, for example, you will find my article on transnational solidarity, but also an article that I wrote together with James Cox, a scholar and a wonderful social worker from Scotland. We looked at people with disabilities, and those who are interested in disability, please go and look at these articles. They are These two are for sure open access, but there are also some that are open access. And there is a new book that a friend of mine published, and she got also some awards for it. Olivera Simic. Olivera Simic is professor of law at the Brisbane University, Australia, but she comes from Banja Luka. Banja Luka is the capital of Republic of Srpska, Republika Srpska nowadays, which is in Bosnia and Herzegovina. She published this most interesting book also for social work, because you can see how to zoom, how to use a case study approach without even mentioning it as a case study or as a kind of micro history that we would call it in social work research. The title is Madam War Criminal, Biljana Plaušić, Serbian Iron Lady, written by Olivera Simic and published last year. Biljana Plaušić was a prime minister of the Republika Srpska. She's now, if I'm not mistaken, 95 years old, might be plus minus. She was in Hague. She was punished, imprisoned in Hague in Sweden. I mean, in the Hague prisons, but in Sweden she was, and she spent there 9 years. The war criminals from Yugoslavia were imprisoned together. And not only that Biljana Plaušić had this incredible biology-based, gene-based rhetoric that was used during the war to show that the Bosnians are of a worse genes, of a lower race. Just, we know that race don't exist, but therefore I deliberately use the word race. So the most notorious concepts based on racist ideas on how people are differentiated, she as a prime minister used. She went to the front. She was encouraging the soldiers, the military, the top military, and so she never killed anyone. She never was accused of killing anyone, but her hate speech made her the war criminal. The most horrible thing that comes out from this book is also that she never felt sorry for what she did. And she said a couple of times, if I would need to do it again, I would do it again. Still today, she gets love letters or letters of admiration from Serb people. Today, she lives in Belgrade, in the capital, in a kind of in a flat alone. She was befriended with the war criminals during being imprisoned in Sweden. They were cooking together, they were making fun, they ate together, and she only got 9 years because it was a few years less than she was accused. She was sentenced for because she behaved very well, she cooked well, she obeyed the rules and things like that. So this book is an incredible document, and on the top of everything, she was a woman, and we rarely have stories about war criminals who are women. And very often people still have this romanticizing, essentializing beliefs that women are by their nature a better people. So the context is really interesting. A part of everything, she was a professor. She had a PhD in biology. She came from an intellectual family, and all of her knowledge natural sciences she used to confirm the racist war. Olivera Simic went to her place, and she listened to her, and Biljana Plaušić is still the woman who cannot be stopped and who doesn't answer questions, but she decides what she will tell and what she will not. So for social work, methodologically, this is a fascinating book. It reads like a detective story. It tells a lot about the time of the 90s in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It tells about how hatred is developed. It tells about how many people never felt sorry for what they did and things like that. So strongly recommended. So here I just want to say that the consequences of war we can look at from the individual level or group or collective, the structures. And definitely what is also important for us in social work is that humanitarian ties are torn apart, hatred is growing, not only, and there are some examples, of course, always examples of incredible solidarity. So what kind of theories and methods can we apply when we look at the social work and war? We can have the whole body of knowledge that we learn under the anti-racist and anti-colonial, decolonial social work. We can look at the gender-aware social work or anti-feminist social work. We can look at the disability studies, and including older people. We can look at the trauma-specific social work, including the issue of shared trauma that Shula Ramon wrote about. There is a new Elgar encyclopedia of social work that came out a month ago, and you can read on shared trauma a lot. We can look at the child protection and trauma-aware social work in the area of displacement, vulnerability, of course, migration, people on the move, people who are fragmented due to the different statuses that they get when they arrive to another country. We can also look at the community mobilization social work. There might be some others, so I'm happy to add it into the list. So if militarism needs a system of war, social work needs a system of peace and conscious connectedness. So connectedness doesn't happen just like that. We have to work on it. And memory work is important. The memory work, this is the notion that was coined by Jeffrey Hartman long ago. And he said, memory work is work. So looking at who has the right to have memory, whose memory is denied, why is it denied? How can we encourage people to have the memory, to bring the personal memory into the public space? All of these issues are important, and I wrote about that in a couple of my articles, so you can look at this. I think the memory work is really important. But there are also other work to do, sometimes protesting, sometimes documenting. Sometimes what we can do is the transnational solidarity, and I will say a few words on that in a minute. So this man is protesting. This is a sociology, Istver, and he just said, "Što vojna, net vojne, why the war, no war," and he lost his position at the university. I know him personally, and but this is very courageous in the middle of Moscow, 2022. And he's lucky not to be sent to Siberia. And then there is another woman, Dinara Gagarina, who was from the Higher School of Economics in Perm, and she was posting pacifist online messages. And they say these pacifist online messages destroy the reputation of the university, and she was expelled from the university. And on the right side is 19 years old Lena Mas, and Szymanski and Masri photographed her, who also protested, and she was imprisoned. So after 2022, or after October the 7th, 2023, we see a lot of this kind of examples, that very young people or very old people in UK over 80s are protesting, and they are seen as terrorists because they are protesting for peace. So here you can see on the left side the fight to stop the war in Vietnam. So and then stop the genocide. So stop the war against Palestinians. And we can see that this has become a kind of big movement of solidarity, a movement of courage, a movement of awareness raising, a movement of young and old and different ethnicity people saying we do need to reach peace. This is impossible, and we cannot close our eyes when we look at the genocide. And then we have Alexandra Matvichuk, who was the head of Peace Organization, Peace Institute in Kiev, in Ukraine, and she got a Nobel Peace Award in 2022. And when she was interviewed, and she was asked what she hoped for Ukraine, and then she said, "Now, for the question, how can you help Ukraine? The answer, please provide Ukraine with weapons." But this is still not a world which is safe to live in. When a human rights lawyer cannot use legal instrument to defend people from Russian atrocities, this is a very dangerous world to live in. So my problem with this sentence is, of course, it's a kind of a paradox that we cannot resolve actually, or an ethical issue that is almost impossible to resolve. So there is a peace activist with a Nobel Peace Award prize who asked for more weapons. Is this a stance that we can say, okay, she's Ukrainian, she has the right to say, she has the right, Ukrainian people should decide, And then on the other side, there are people who say, but with the weapons, we can just expand the wars. We cannot end it. And so it's a lot of, at least we can recognize that there are ambivalences. There is not a clear answer and clear position, I would say, at least not for me. I'm very open, but for me, this is a kind of an ambivalence. Let's put it like this. And I would like just to mention a few words about our transnationality, transnational solidarity initiative. We started it, so when we say we, there are a couple of people, but most active are Shula Ramon, James Cox, and people who wrote in both of the publications I mentioned to you. They are people from European Association of the Schools of Social Work, from Sub-Regional Eastern European Association, from International Association. And the transnational solidarity is, there are a lot of initiatives in this area. not to, I mean, the last one that is really powerful is the flotilla movement. The flotilla movement that goes into the international waters to reach Gaza in order to provide some humanitarian help to Gazans, but also some to express solidarity with people who are suffering. Those who wrote about transnational solidarity always emphasized our situated ethics. From where are we talking? From what we are standing for? Are we working towards empowerment? Do we have the capacity to address difficult issues? Are we able to address structural inequalities and all of these things? So there were a lot of women's transnational solidarity, anti-oppressive practices, indigenous people solidarity, and things like that. There was in the 90s when there was a danger that the nuclear weapon would be used. There was a big anti-war campaign that younger people even forget and don't know about nowadays. Ecological transnational solidarity has become very important. The degrowth movement, feminist activism, and most of the writers, they say transnational solidarity strengthens the right of the silenced and marginalized, we do need to build alliances across the countries for transnational solidarity. So we did it. And we did it via Zoom. And these are some sessions. I invited my colleagues from Ukraine, whom I knew for many years, because Shula Ramon and myself and some other people worked on establishing social work, the first social work department in Kiev at the National University in 1992. So people who were my students back then are now social work professors. And I called them and I asked them, I said, we would like to do something. What can we do? Can we have the first meeting? And now last week we held the 58th meeting of solidarity. So we ask people, what are your needs? We provide and shared information, where are scholarships, how to come to Europe, I mean, to Poland, to Slovenia. We collected donations. We run workshops on specific social work topics related to war. We provide knowledge and experience from other war, past and present. It was a kind of mutual learning. We learned people who don't experience inevitable war, I mean, direct war, we learned a lot and they learned. And the idea was that Ukrainian scholars, because they are from Eastern Europe, are marginalized. Nobody quotes. I know this from my own experience. If you are coming from Eastern Europe, nobody would quote you. Nobody really is interested in the writings mostly. But when you live in war, you are double marginalized. So the idea was how to help people not to be so marginalized than they could be, and also raising awareness of their suffering. So they were all everything we addressed, we talked about each time when we met. First we met once a week, then we started to meet once a month. Now we meet once a month, and July, August we don't meet, and usually we have also a kind of a presentation during that meeting. So if some of you would be interested in joining us or even give a presentation on a topic, you are very, very welcome to do that. So I called our transnational solidarity meetings a place of compassion and caring, a place of mutual learning, sharing and listening to personal stories, and also bearing witness. I feel very close to the war in Ukraine, not because of my geographic location, but because from the day one almost, I listened what is going on. And here I want to share some quotes that I collected that I felt are particularly important. For example, social workers left. Many of them have to take care of their own families. People with disabilities could not walk to the shelters because of their impairments and construction barriers, as the shelters were not designed for them. My mother lives here. She's 90 years old. I cannot leave the country and leave her alone. So these quotes are from social work professors who work in different universities, but mostly at the National University of Kiev Mohyla Academy, where there is the first department of social work placed and where we have the strongest ties. I'm afraid that students will not return to their studies. Many of them left the country and enrolled in studying in other countries. Lifts in cities have not been working since the war began, and older people cannot leave their homes. We do not know how many older and disabled people live alone in large flats buildings, alone in large flat buildings, have access to doctors and medicines. And we know so far that in the first months, doctors were ordered not to do the personal visits because there was such big need on the ground, let's put it like that. So we don't know how many older people died or people with diabetes or so who were not able to go from high-rising skyscrapers that Kiev has, walking down and things like that. Now I hear bombs in the back. Maybe I need to close the Zoom. So this was, there were a lot of this kind of things. I borrowed a generator to my daughter, or my daughter lent a generator to me so I can now talk to you and things like this. And then a social worker from Scotland, he said, your courage and resilience encourage me too. Another colleague said, we are physically exhausted. During the day we work with refugees, give lectures to students, work with them. And at night we go to the basement because of the bomb alarms. And I must say that they have all the time, the university works all the time. Social work departments work all the time. Even in 2023, they had national accreditation process. And this is very tough. Those of us who work at the university, we know what accreditation means. So I was saying how crazy the country must be that to expose the exhausted people to accreditation process. But anyway, okay, so I said this already. I said that already. And this also my, important, yeah. So I know that I'm quite long now already, but I just want to mention that we have in social work an early tradition that is advocacy for peace, and we should not forget it. For example, Michael Reich and Julie Andrews, in her book, I forgot to put the year, I think it was 2005, but I'm not sure. A wonderful book about the road not taken is the title. They document that when Jane Addams advocated against Americans entering the First World War, everybody hated her. So there is quote like this: "It was not a crank who said Jane Addams should be hanged from the nearest lamppost." And this was during the First World War, and in 1931 she was awarded with the Nobel Prize for Peace. So that's the Jane Addams with the peace flag. Yeah, and I think we need to get reminded if we really want to, if I say we need a system of peace, we need to think about what peace is, we need to talk about it, and so I'm sure you do this a lot now. Then I want to remind you at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, an international association that still works. Alice Masaryk from Poland, from Czech, at that time Czechoslovakia, today Czech Republic. Her father was the famous prime minister. She spoke there, and then on the very left you have Alice Salomon from Berlin, a good friend of Jane Addams, who spoke at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And Jane Addams was the one who actually was one of the founders. She said peace would no longer be an absence of war, but the unfolding of worldwide processes making for the nurture of human life. So, well, very far away from where we are now. And Alice Salomon, I like the quote here from 1928. She said, "War annihilates everything that social work tries to accomplish." Absolutely. This is the reason why social workers should be the first ones to facilitate and maintain peace, creating international relations. So she was a great internationalist, but also a peace person, which didn't prevent, of course, the Nazis to expel her from the country in 1936, I think, where she had to, and then Joachim Willer wrote in his biography about Alice Salomon how depressed she probably was, and how this is the reason why we don't know much about what he actually did in New York when she had to leave Germany, and then we know that she died in poverty and alone. And Dame Elaine Young husband, so the big state order, the Dame Elaine Young husband from UK, London, who developed a lot of social services and made a whole system of how to develop social services. And many other Western countries after 1945 looked at her work from 1947 about developing social services and what should be the principles. And so she was very positive, like everybody was after the Second World War. People truly believed that nothing like a war can happen in Europe again. So she said, now the stagnation is ended, and we are once more on the move, etc., and so forth. So you can see that we live in a very, very different times. And here we have global ethics statement, and it's good to look at them and to look at statement 9.3 and see what is missing. I think a lot is missing, and I think it's very, very, it's not well comprehensively done. And I think we have to add to this global social work statement, for example, conscientious objection. Or how social work should fight for peace and things like that. And then also when we look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and because I'm particularly interested in disability, I looked at Article 11. And the Article 11, it says that the states should do everything to support and prevent that people with disabilities would be at a greater risk than other people, because the shelters are not available, because people cannot hear the bomb alarms, because people who have sensory impairments, or especially who don't see, who have visual impairments, they can orient at home. They can somehow manage to be at home, even alone. They know how to handle small spaces, but when they are in an empty space, they cannot handle it anymore. So all of this we have to look at. This can remind us what we forget sometimes in social work. And this here I come to my favorite example on Women in Black. This was a solidarity of women during Yugoslav war, especially the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And actually the Women in Black movement was established at the end of 80s. And paradoxically or symbolically important for today times, they were established by Jewish and Palestinian women who stand together silently, wearing black clothes and having different banners. And the silence was symbolical. Women in the past were asked to shut down, to be silent. But they were there. They were in front of national, symbolic, important monuments and things like that. And when Women in Black appeared in Serbia, in Belgrade, this was the time when Serbia was in war with Bosnia and Herzegovina and with Kosovo. So men and also some women would pass by them. They would spook on them, and they would scream on them, "You are the state traitors," things like that. So, and they just stand still. I mean, it was not that it wouldn't be dangerous. I just want to show you some more pictures done by Vesna Pavlović, who is a Serbian American woman at that time living in Serbia, now in the United States, and she's an architect. Wonderful photos. And this poster say men who are war criminals should go to Hague. So this was really, really scary, really dangerous thing to do. And they did it. You can see that there are some men involved as well. For example, 20 years after the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they commemorated genocide. So these were all different scenes, different times, different years, where Women in Black, they met once a week, always at the same place, at the same time, always in black, always in silence, and they became very famous. A lot of books have been written on them and so. So I just want to go back for a second. So I mentioned the memory work that is important to do. It's important to document, and my photographs or these PowerPoints are intending to document things that would otherwise maybe be forgotten. We do need to do interpretative labor. For example, I said before that often people said the war in Yugoslavia is a religious war, which was not true at all. But we can see the prejudices about the kind of the Balkan, the primitive, and Maria Tudorova wrote a book, The Balkanism, and showed how the Balkan was established at the end of the 19th century as a place, an unknown place of primitive, backwards people. And then maybe you've heard the notion, the Balkanization of the relationships. So when the war in Yugoslavia started, people from the United States often, they say, the Balkan, the Balkanization of relationship. These are the people who cannot solve the conflicts without weapons, without fight, without violence. But then Miglena Nikolchina from Bulgaria, which is also considered to be the Balkan, when Brexit happened, she said, you see, the Balkanization of the UK and things like that. So all of this work we have to do, and we also need to address the gray zones and what is not spoken out, and looking at the everyday life from below, which we did with the transnational solidarity, and listen and bear witness. I want to just quickly point to this monument, which is, to my knowledge, one of the rare, maybe the only monument in Europe. Maybe I'm mistaken. I'm happy to be corrected. The name is Heroinat, so the female heroine. This is 20,000 pixels, 20,000 faces of women, symbolizing 20,000 women who were raped during the war with Serbia. And this is in the city Pristina. So I think it's important to remember, to commemorate, to share, to tell, and so. Okay, so now I'm going to end, and I'm sorry I was long, but I'm aware that I'm sure that you are in a shade, and I will close down with the quote by Svetlana Alexievich, who is my favorite writer. She is the Belarusian Nobel Prize laureate for literature from 2015, and she wrote a lot of amazing books on Chernobyl, the last victims, and other books. But the book that I refer to here is The Unwomanly Face of the War. The book has been translated in many languages. In English, I don't know if it is in German, I'm sure it is. And she says, I'm just quoting it from my Slovenian, I think from Slovenian translation. I wish to write such a book about war that we would find a war abhorrent, and the very thought of it unacceptable, insane, to make even the generals sick. So I leave you with that, and I expect that we have now a kind of 15 or something minutes break, and then we will continue. Thank you very much.